Thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Sam Rockwell of Happy Foodi. Sam, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Cameron. It's good to be here.
Of course. So I'd like to start out with your upbringing. So where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
I grew up in northern New Jersey, suburb to New York City, and my childhood was great. Very supportive family, very supportive parents. And when I talk about supportive, I don't just mean from a financial standpoint.
Mhm.
I mean from a motivational standpoint, from an emotional standpoint. And I think that longer term in my life, that has led me to this place where I've had and been afforded the opportunities to grow in business.
Mm.
And again, it's not just a financial upbringing that they've
Yeah,
provided me with. It is that push to do more and that encouragement that you can go out and do your own thing. And if you fail, you'll be okay. But at the same time, go do something special.
for sure. So as we'll get into in the interview, right out of college, you're really a full going entrepreneur. I'm curious, what did your parents kind of do if they had an inspiration on this?
Yeah, for sure. My dad's a serial entrepreneur. He's not in the food space, but
Okay.
whether it's widgets or waffles, it's business.
Yeah.
And I think at the beginning, when you're at the beginning of this journey, which we'll call it a sprint and a marathon,
Yeah.
um, the guidance and advice can be very broad. Whether you're in the security industry, which my father's in security, or you're in the automobile industry, or you're in consumer products, it's business.
Yeah.
And so your guidance is high level, but it's actually instrumental. Um, he played a very significant role in the
Mm.
beginning, but as our business has grown and evolved, finding mentors and finding people that can surround me and surround us that can be more poignant in their guidance has been fundamental. Very
Mm.
specific guidance where I like to bring in, our investors and my mentors. I try to find people whose collective yesterdays are
Yeah.
my tomorrows.
Mm.
And so while again, basic business knowledge in any industry is really important and can
Yeah.
help from the highest level, you need some industry specific guidance to say, hey, I made this mistake, or I hit
For sure.
that wall, make a left or make a right.
Yeah, for sure. So you went on to study at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2006. What did you
Yes.
study there then?
So undergraduate business degree,
Okay.
risk management and insurance was my major, which I think has been a, a good a good base for me to think about business and to assess opportunity as well as the risk associated with it. It's not just insurance, which is just a form of risk management.
Yeah,
It's more or less enterprise risk management, which that's ultimately what business is managing risks and
for sure.
leaning into certain areas where there's opportunity.
For sure.
Um, yeah.
With your time there, were you involved with any athletics or clubs?
Yeah. So I played club soccer. I
Okay.
originally went there to play soccer.
Okay.
And then you start to realize that while I have a passion for soccer and still play,
Yeah,
that's not what's going to fuel the rest of your life. And I
for sure.
thought to myself early on that what's in between my ears is going to take me a lot farther than my legs.
Yeah.
Um, so that's where I started to pivot and put my focus, at least professionally, into business.
Mm. So right around this time, you're beginning your own ventures and Waffle becomes a thing. I'm curious then, what inspired you to overall enter the food industry, saying your father didn't come from it prior?
Well, I'm a really good consumer.
Yeah.
And so if it's a sweet, if it's a food product that I like, I am a loyal customer.
Yeah.
And I saw somebody selling waffles in a ski mountain. And while it smelled amazing, it tasted amazing, the thing that really got me was that 30 people would line up in 20-degree weather. And if
Yeah.
you have more people than degrees temperature, it's what's going on here. Something special is happening.
Yeah.
And the ski mountains are very seasonal businesses, winter,
Yeah.
December to March. What if we took that concept to a non-seasonal marketplace, a big city, New York, Chicago, LA,
Mm.
Miami? Maybe it can last And that 30 person line can become a 40 person line 365 days a year.
Yeah.
Being an undergraduate business student, I think that teaches you personally how to read. It doesn't necessarily teach you how to understand. You don't
For sure.
understand it, but you need to know
Yeah.
how to read in order to understand it.
Yeah.
And so knowing how to read, I wanted to dive into business. And this is 2009, which is kind of the height of the recession. And Cameron, you're a business student. There
Yep.
are a lot of fellow students that we had or have that try to impress recruiters.
For sure.
I noticed a lot of them walking around with Financial Times just to impress the recruiter when he or she walked into the interview. It's like, that person doesn't read the Financial Times, but nonetheless, like, I was like, listen, I would bet on myself in any circumstance. And so if I'm going to bet on myself, I'd like to start my own thing. I want to build a floor, not a ceiling.
Yeah.
And again, not sure what I wanted to do, but knowing that I have a passion for food, love to eat food, I'm a good consumer.
For sure.
It made sense. And I wanted to take this concept, bring it to New York City. I talked to my dad, who's a serial entrepreneur, and his advice to me was simple. Sounds good, just do it. Stop talking about it, just do it. He said, so many people get hung up in this notion of what I should do, how I'm going to do it, what's my Excel spreadsheet look like, which, don't get me wrong, being measured is important.
For sure.
But the hardest part of the journey is getting started. So just go. And that's what we ended up doing is like, I started to look at real estate in New York City. And again, height of the recession, so it's a tough time.
Yeah.
And what I learned very quickly is that real property is real expensive.
Yeah.
And if you need the better portion of $500,000 to $1 million, could be a little bit less, could be more, just for the right to cut the ribbon, to then prove concept, that's a big ask. And I didn't have that type of money as a college student. I wasn't going to go to people that I'm close with to raise that type of money on a concept that's unproven. And so my thought process was, well, I know how to read, right? Because I'm going to undergraduate business school, managerial accounting. How do we build our business around a variable costing model? If I could make these waffles and then subsequently sell these waffles, I might not make a lot of money per waffle, but any waffle I sell, I'm making money instead of paying for the right to be in business by upholding this massive real property investment, which is significant overhead.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how we pivoted into becoming a manufacturer. And I use air quotations for that because at the time that meant one waffle iron and me and Justin, who's my co-founding partner, making it out of our family's kitchen. Don't tell anybody that's how we sold our first waffles, but that's how we got started. And it scaled from there.
That's amazing. So with these first waffles you're making then, where did you look for sourcing like ingredients and where did that come from? I'm curious.
Well, so at first it was very simple. I think it was the baking aisle in our local grocery store.
Okay.
From there, we graduated to Restaurant Depot, which was industrial sized.
Yeah.
But after that, and I say that seriously, but also in jest, because that's just how you get going.
For
and
sure.
The difference of a penny or 2 pennies when you're doing 100 waffles in a day is not that significant. When you're doing 1 million waffles a week, it becomes very significant.
Yeah.
Our growth came, again, organically. And it was as we built out some scale, it was add a waffle iron, add a person, add a waffle iron, add a person. Well, that's great. So you can produce more units per day, but you don't actually recognize any additional economies of scale. You're just replicating your process. So there became a point in time, a crossover point, where we needed to make some sort of investment into a manufacturing line where instead of making 1,000 waffles in a day across, call it 15 hourly employees, we could make 1,200 waffles in an hour with one employee. And then you start to recognize additional scale capabilities as well as economies of those scale capabilities. And that's ultimately what parlayed us and leveraged us into a place where we could support bigger retailers, build out a brand, and ultimately cross category lines to become more than just a waffle business.
Yeah. So I'm curious, logistically, when you're making these waffles, what does the process look like from the creation of the waffle to freezing and distributing? Like how does that look?
Well, so now whether it's a waffle or one of our meals or a frozen pizza, which under Happy Foodi we do all of these things, it's
Yeah.
very similar in process.
Yeah.
Um, R&D is a critical component of this process, but we'll call it the innovation process because it is way more encompassing than just research and development. That is a step in the process.
Yeah.
We start with data, analytics, trends, what the market and consumers are looking for, ingredients. From there, it goes into R&D, and we try to formulate and create products that match what the brand identity and
Yeah.
fall in line with that, and B, are of proper value to the consumer and viable within our manufacturing capabilities.
Mm.
From there, the we'll call it the commercialization of it, whether again it's a waffle or a meal or a pizza,
Yeah.
is the same. You start to take these benchtop recipes and expand them into, if we're using waffles as the example, how we can produce 80,000
Yeah.
at a time instead of 80
Mm.
at a time. And so we do things or attempt to do things in the most automated way possible.
For sure.
Unfortunately, the cost of human labor has become ever more cumbersome
Yeah.
to businesses, and those ultimately make their way into product costs, and the consumer has to pay for it. And
For
it's a
sure.
competitive marketplace. And so with the waffles, it's mix all of the ingredients together, and they are then segmented and divided into portion controlled pieces of dough.
Mm-hmm.
And then they run through an automatic waffle baking line, go into an ambient cooling, and then into a quick deep freeze. And then they go into packaging, whether it's into an individual wrap, then into a box, or whatever the finished format is.
Yeah.
Same thing for a meal.
So yeah, branching off in 2018 then, as you're talking with the new meals where Waffle, this is a segment of Waffle. And Happy Foodi, is this when you introduced the new meals? Is when you introduced Happy Foodi?
Yeah. So what happened is that come 2017,
Okay.
2016, 2017, a lot of the quick service restaurants, namely McDonald's, went to all day breakfast.
Yeah.
And all day breakfast made breakfast items permissible north of 10 a.m.
Yeah.
And consumers, very much driven by convenience, quality, as well as the ability to eat or consume something en route, whether it's to work or to school.
Yeah.
And we started to take our waffles and find a way to create sandwiches with them. Sweet and savory was a very hot trend. Sausage, egg, and cheese on a buttery maple waffle. Pretty good combination. Chicken and waffles becoming very popular. So we started to create these sandwich handhelds so that people could eat breakfast items either during breakfast times or lunch or even dinner times. And very easy to carry them and heat them up. It's a super convenient product. Because of that, we realized that our capabilities expanded outside of the waffle iron. So how do we take these capabilities and marry them into products that grow outside of it? And what is it that we really care about? And the truth of the matter is that our whole mission is accessibility, right? How do we create access to something that's a great food product that you do not normally have the ability to get? And the waffle, for example, you have to go over to Europe to get it, or you had to be skiing to get it.
Yeah.
We wanted to make this thing that is a great product accessible. And that means available at the right price point of value to a consumer, those types of things. And now if we take that and expand outside of the waffles, what does accessibility mean? Well, first and foremost, we certainly care about lifestyle diets and trends, eating clean, eating well, keto meals, plant-based meals, gluten-free meals. Eating should never just be an obligation. It should be something that you look forward to. Like I said, I'm a big-time consumer. I'm eating breakfast talking about what we're going to do for dinner. We're eating dinner talking about what we're going to do for breakfast. And so if you're on these lifestyle diets, food should be good still. You can still look forward to that occasion. So that's one. How do we make great food accessible to folks that are on these strict diets? Two is price point. We
Yeah.
really try to keep the most competitive price point and create value for the consumer. We are in this environment now where through social media, everyone has access to the Food Network and everybody has
Yeah.
access to food blogs and Instagrams, and we know what great food is. Well,
Yeah.
great food should be available to all, even if you can't go to that fancy restaurant,
For sure.
which parlays into the next point is that sometimes the fancy restaurants are very expensive.
Yeah.
Well, great food shouldn't be only for the rich and famous. Great
For sure.
food should be available and accessible to all. And then last, but certainly not least, geographic
Of course.
territory is that not all of us live within a close proximity, walking distance or driving distance to those great restaurants, even if they're accessible from a value standpoint.
Mm.
So how do we create something that can be replicated, duplicated, and expanded out to the market so that whether you live in Indiana, in New Jersey, in California, or Kansas, you can have a great meal? And
Mm.
that's really what drove Happy Foodi
Yeah.
into one, what the brand represents, and two, where all of the innovation derives from.
Mm. Presuming that much of your business is mainly retail, I'm
Mhm.
curious, what percentages would you say is retail and D2C? And talking about accessibility, like D2C especially, what does that mean for the frozen food business?
So direct to consumer is something that we have just started to dive into this year. And I think
Okay.
that the pandemic made it a more available option in
Yeah.
frozen foods, but it still is very challenging to deliver value.
For
And
sure.
the reason being is because in order to pack a frozen meal to ship out to a consumer anywhere that buys it directly from us, you have to have a cooler, dry ice, and then rely upon a common carrier like FedEx or UPS or DHL.
Yeah.
And you're subject to their performance records.
Mm.
If they're delayed and the food spoils, well, that's our loss. That's not FedEx or UPS's loss. And so it
Yeah.
becomes somewhat challenging. Separately is how do you create bundle sizes that ultimately translate into a value proposition for the consumer? For
Yeah.
sure, direct to consumer is much more convenient for the consumer,
For
but
sure.
there's a cost with that. And if
Yeah.
you're available in every Walmart in the country, like our products are, well, you can go, for example, our Happy Foodi One Bite Barstool Pizza
Yep.
is available in every single Walmart in the country. You can go to Walmart and buy it for $6.48. If you were to buy it online, we were talking about almost $11 a pizza.
Yeah.
And so it's how do you bundle things so it's not out of reach from a value standpoint, but no matter what, it's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge to try and communicate that to the consumer, but also make it available
For
to
sure.
the consumer. So it's still a learning game. And I would say
Mm.
that the vast majority of our business is still retail while we
Yeah.
work to perfect the value proposition direct to consumer.
Mm. So mentioning that partnership, then I kind of want to move into this Barstool partnership that recently happened. So how did the conversation happen about that? And when would you say time period, if you're allowed to share?
Sure. In the to go into as much detail as I can
For
is
sure.
that our relationship with Barstool predates the pandemic.
Okay.
And prior to the pandemic, I think not just at Barstool with Dave Portnoy, but prior to the pandemic for all of us consumers, frozen food was not the go-to choice.
Yeah.
The pandemic brought us home and made us think about, well, what's convenient, easy, affordable, but also of good quality. And
Yeah.
the freezer is actually the best way to have a product have an extended shelf life without adding preservatives and using quality ingredients.
For sure.
And connecting with Barstool prior to the pandemic about some of these benefits, married then with the demand into the freezer driven by the pandemic, which
Mm.
then layered on top of Dave doing frozen pizza reviews, led
Yeah.
to this enormous market opportunity, I think, for us together. And what Barstool brings to the table is obviously the reach, the audience,
Yeah.
as well as Dave being the pizza guy. He
Yeah.
knows all of the best attributes about pizza. He's tried so many of them. And
Yeah.
so he can say, this is the crust, this is the sauce, this is the cheese. And for us, we are a consumer products company that has enough of a vertical integration and enough infrastructure to
Mm.
bring big programs to life and big products to life. The big boys move very slowly, which I see as an advantage to us. They're very calculated and deliberate, but
Yeah.
their innovation timelines are 36 to 48 months.
Mm.
The little guys, which, in order to get to our position, you have to start small, but the little
For
guys
sure.
aren't able to support program launches that are national
Yeah.
necessarily. So for us, we're not the big guy. We move a lot quicker and we're a lot more flexible, and certainly can have the influence and collaboration with a Dave Portnoy.
Yeah.
But we're not the small guys because we can actually support national launches and be able to produce for the Walmarts of the world, the Krogers of the world, the Targets of the world, the Costcos of the world, and beyond. And so
Yeah.
I think that the partnership kind of worked very well together
Mm.
because this is Dave's Pizza. He did work with our R&D team to create it, and our team is experienced enough and our infrastructure is profound enough that we can actually deliver this product and continue to produce it.
Yeah. So mentioning the involvement there, I'm curious, what did the prototyping process look like for creating this pizza with your R&D and then Dave?
Yep. So it started with a bunch of due diligence,
Yeah.
understanding Dave's preferences before presenting him with anything. So you kind of
Yeah.
narrow the options ahead of time. But from there, as you mass produce products, this isn't what you get at your local pizzeria. Remember, it's a frozen pizza,
Yeah.
which Dave oftentimes reminds everybody that there is a pizza scale and then there's a frozen pizza scale.
Yeah.
Because in every scenario, going to a John's of Bleecker, for example, which is one of Dave's favorite places, is going to be preferred over
Yeah.
having a frozen pizza. However, when it comes to frozen pizza, you still can create a really great product, but the ability to mass produce, John's of Bleecker can maybe make, I'm making up an example and I don't know for sure,
Yeah.
250 pizzas a night.
For sure.
We need to try to find ways to make 1 million pizzas a day.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, there needs to be some sort of standardization so that, again, if you're buying our product in Bloomington, Indiana,
Mhm.
or in New York City, it's the same product and the same experience and the same price.
Yeah.
And so we started with the crust options that we're able to produce. So number of different crusts. And you can work on structure, you can work on ingredients and flours and things like that. But that's how we started to narrow down the crust choice.
Mm.
From once we select a crust choice, then we could start to work on the sauce. So a
Yeah.
bunch of different sauces with different levels of sweetness versus spice on the same crust now. Crust is the control. Now we start to build. Now you pick a sauce. So once Dave was able to collaborate with our team, go from crust to sauce, we can then work on toppings. And ultimately that manifests itself into a finished product that Dave is superbly involved in shaping and creating. And it's been really cool because we created the best pizza out there.
That's amazing. I love
Yeah.
that. So hearing, being a follower of Dave's and following you lately, there has been much demand around this pizza when it launched in Walmart. And I'm curious, what did production look like trying to keep up with that demand? What, was it pretty even?
Look, it's still going, which is
Yeah.
the optimal scenario for manufacturing on a mass scale.
Yeah.
Part of the challenges in being a manufacturer to the retailers of the world is how do you measure demand? And oftentimes what you're seeing in terms of consumption on the shelf is real-time data,
Yeah.
but to react to real-time data, you're already behind. And so you have to be able to forecast out because there's a time lag between consumption and production.
Yeah.
You have to produce 4 to 8 weeks ahead of it getting to the shelf and ultimately to a consumer's home.
Yeah.
And so in the beginning, it becomes very difficult to measure. Now, the fortunate reality is that the pizza is a frozen pizza. And
Yeah.
so you have a fresh shelf life of a long period of time. And so building an inventory stock is something that we can do. And that's
Yeah.
kind of the way that we managed it. Now, as a business owner, you have to manage inventory because inventory is cash.
Yeah. For
And
sure.
so managing the right level of inventory and not overburdening yourself with too much that's the finesse aspect. And we have a
For
great
sure.
team here at Happy Foodi that is measuring all of those things. we're looking at trends, we're looking at sales information, data, market information ahead of time to be able to say, okay, this is going to be our starting inventory position, and
Mhm.
we're going to make adjustments along the way, hopefully producing more as
Yeah,
consumption goes up. But it's been an awesome experience, and I'm very proud of our team. I'm grateful for our partnership with the Barstool team as we drive consumption and we keep up with production.
for sure. It's very impressive. With a vast amount of offerings today, with Happy Foodi in general, breakfast,
Yeah.
lunch, and dinner, I'm curious if you have an idea of what the top seller might be, disregarding any partnerships. So with Happy Foodi, like in the frozen area, best seller.
Are, are you saying what's our best selling item for all of our brands, all of our portfolio?
Exact. If you have any idea, is it pizza
Yeah.
category? Is it pasta, etc.?
So the pizza's very, very new. But for us at Happy Foodi, under the Happy Foodi brand, our Southwest Chicken Keto Bowl
Okay.
and our Alfredo Chicken Keto Bowl are our best performing items. I mean, they're permissible. So we like to
Yeah.
say that they're like indulgence without compromise because they
Yeah.
taste amazing, but you stick to this lifestyle diet of very, very low carbs and actually low calories, but high in flavor.
Mm,
When it comes to the pizza velocities are certainly higher than that of lifestyle diet products.
for sure.
We are still learning the consumption trends, but right now it looks like cheese pizza and pepperoni pizza are flying.
Awesome.
And Dave's a cheese pizza guy, right? That's where you
Yeah.
start. And then you can graduate into the pepperoni, the three meat, and the supreme. But he always says you start with cheese to get a baseline of how good the pizza is.
Mm.
And I think that a lot of Dave's followers and the stoolies have been following suit with that.
Amazing. So I like to conclude each episode with this. If you could share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned or regret, what would that be?
Well, it's no regrets, but start.
Y- Yeah,
Just
I like
get
that.
going. And you're going to learn along the way. You're going to fall along the way. It's about getting up, pivoting, adjusting. Think about it. We started as a waffle business and now we create all sorts of food products for all of the retailers.
Mm,
And so while you may have an initial plan, know that there are going to be opportunities and pivot points that you need to take advantage of. And as the last piece of advice is along that journey, it becomes an emotional roller coaster. You have opportunities that you capture that bring you to the highest of highs, and you have challenges that bring you to the lowest of lows,
mm,
powering through those and knowing that it should be like a trend. So
yeah,
there's ups and downs, but if your trend line is up because of your perseverance and because you're going, I think it becomes all worth it.
for sure. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining me. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Happy Foodi at happyfoodi.com.
Yep, with an eye. Thanks so much,
Perfect.
Cameron. It's awesome, man.